What is up, everybody? This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here again without Ian Gibson, but it looks like he'll be here in the future. I figured out some scheduling things that we can make it easier for us to get together on these days to do these recap and preview shows. So hopefully going forward, he'll be here more often, which would be nice. It's as much as I like doing it, I do like doing it with Ian because it's just easier to have a back and forth with each other instead of just me always holding the conversation the entire time. So it's a little bit more difficult for me to sit there and just constantly have the, what's going on. It's easier if I can take a second, gather my thoughts as he's going over what he's talking about, and then I can come in, and counter with my point or whatever. But regardless, it was a great week of college football. Probably one of the best weeks I've seen in a long time. I think it was like 2007 was the last time we saw this many top 25 matchups. I believe 7 of those were in that period in like September time. I think that's specifically what the caveat is. So there was like 6 matchups in on Saturday, just games left and right. I tried to watch as many as I could yesterday. There was so many, it was almost impossible to. I had my big screen TV going. I had my desktop going. I had my phone going. I could have even had my tablet going if I really wanted to. But I just tried to really, as I could, watch like 3 games at once. It's a little too much. Like, honestly, especially with certain games, I really wanted to watch the Florida State Clemson game, which I watched the entire thing, and it was a great game. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. I really wanted to watch the USF Rice game, and I really wanted to watch the UCLA Utah game, which I watched both of those back and forth. I kept switching back and forth, and I even did a little run in between, so I made the most of my afternoon as best I could. But just a tremendous day overall. It's definitely a college football lovers day. It was something that you'll appreciate, especially on those days when there's not as many good games. So, savor what happened yesterday. There'll be some good days as well. Obviously, there's always a lot of good days with college football, but then there's some stinkers. Like, it just is what it is. It's just with what you have with college football. So let's begin. The first game I want to talk about was the UCLA Utah game, because that was, out of the 4 teams that I cover or that we cover, that is by far the best game of the day. It was a lot of hype into this game because Dante Moore was looking very good at the start of the year. He was putting up really good numbers. UCLA was rolling. The offense was steamrolling people. The run game was just ridiculous. Carson Steele was having a really good go of it. And then incoming this game, Cam Rising still didn't play. The money line looked like it moved, thinking that maybe Cam Rising would have played, but he didn't end up playing. Utah didn't need him, though. And it's evident with this defense, Utah has the best defense, bar none, in the Pac-12, and maybe one of the best, I'd say top 8 defenses in the country. They are just ferocious. I mean, they're attacking the offensive line nonstop throughout the game. They, prevent the run game to almost non-existent in every team they play. And they played Baylor, Florida, and UCLA at this point. I don't think there's a single team in the country that has the argument of a better schedule than Utah. Utah played their asses off without their starting quarterback, and they're 4-0. At this point, until they lose, they deserve a lot of props for what they're doing. And I think that, it's amazing what Whittingham has done. He prevented the urge of putting in Rising prematurely, because if he goes in there early and he gets hurt, then it's over for them, like, completely. Like, they're hanging on right now, but they're doing a tremendous job. That defense, first play of the game, boom, UCLA goes back to pass. Dante Moore throws. errant pass. I don't know what he was doing, because even if you watch the route, it would have been way behind the guy anyways, and he throws it into like almost triple coverage. And the linebacker for Utah just runs it right back in. Boom, touchdown. They're up 7-0 first play from scrimmage. Very eerily similar to the Florida game, where it sets them up for the rest of the game. Huge difference for them, especially for a team that likes to play defense. To get a 7-0 lead right away. I mean, that's a huge confidence booster. I don't care where you're, what team you are. You are going to have, a lot of momentum moving forward if you're starting a game off 7-0 without any other kind of play. If it was a 70-yard throwing touchdown like it was in the Florida game, or an interception return for a touchdown in the UCLA game. Just a tremendous start for Utah. And then they bottled up Dante Moore, countless sacks. I mean, they were constantly in the backfield the entire time. It was just tremendous. And, that red zone turnover that the Bruins had, honestly, it was probably the play of the game, because if they score there, they keep it a one-score game at 14-7 after Utah had scored earlier in the game after the other early score. And, if the Bruins had scored there when they were moving the ball pretty well, they would have made it 14-7, and then the second touchdown they scored later in the game would have tied it up. So who knows what would have happened if they don't turn it over there, which was a fumble by Dante Moore. So huge turnovers by Dante Moore. I know it was only 2, but one too many. Honestly, really, just if it was just one, they probably would have won the game. But just a crazy game. I mean, it was low scoring, but it was a good game. They pinned their ears back in that last quarter, Utah, because they knew that UCLA had to throw it, and they just kept coming after Dante, and they got him several times in that last period. Just a tremendous game. I don't think this is the end for UCLA. They still have a lot to play for. This is one loss. They can still get into the Pac-12 championship game regardless of this one loss. So there's a lot to play for. They have plenty of games to get right, to get back into the season, and plenty of chances to redeem themselves. Totally redeem themselves. Anyways, I had to do that. The next game, just a stinker. What a stinker. Charlotte, Florida. The Gators, I know the Twitter Gator family was melting down last night, and I get it. It was a tough game. The offense struggled mightily. They kicked 5 field goals. The defense, though, I'm going to say this. I know it was obviously a struggle. The special teams, besides the field goal makes, were a lot of penalties, and they did get a field. They blocked a punt partially, which they haven't done in a long time, and they had a good return. It was brought back by penalty, so the penalties were a struggle. They were missing guys on field goal block and other different special teams plays, so missing guys there, which is mind-blowing. But I will say, in that Notre Dame game, they, on that tumultuous play, or the climax, the final play, they didn't have enough men on defense as well. They only had 10. They were missing alignment. So it does happen, even to really good teams, which you could definitely say Notre Dame is a really good team, a potential playoff team. So I will say the defense for Florida, tremendous night. Just, ridiculous. Charlotte's not very good. Jalen Jones, their quarterback, that was a former recruit of Florida. Actually, I think he was on campus for a short period before getting kicked off by Dan Mullen. And in that Chris Steele saga, where Chris Steele ended up going out to USC. No, regardless, it was a great effort by the defense. They were ferocious in the first half. I was watching a lot of the highlights because I watched the condensed game. So I got to watch the whole game, and, just put it to them. I think they only had like 200 yards total offense. Now they're up to like 5th nationally, which, considering they played Tennessee and Utah in those mix of games. That's a really good number right now, 5th nationally. That's huge. Considering where they were last year, they were like, I think, near 100th in the nation, which is complete turnaround from one year to the next. Just a night and day difference. Austin Armstrong deserves all the credit in the world. And counter that with, I think you have to temper what happened because, the game in the beginning of it started off with 2 offensive linemen being suspended for the first half, and Kingsley, the center, Egokon, missing the entire game because of his ankle. So it was 3 of the 5 starting offensive linemen weren't there. There was a new tight end starting. There was, it's just, I'm not excusing it because it was obviously bad. The play calling was very conservative. They didn't really go after it on 4th downs, but they also weren't getting the push that they were needed on running plays. Anytime it was 3rd and short or whatever, it was ugly. They could not get the push. They were not getting the running lanes that they needed to be able to convert those short yardage plays, and it was ugly. They were not being able to do the things that they did the previous week against Tennessee, which it is a huge letdown going from basically demolishing Tennessee and going into this game and struggling to the point where, they looked ugly and it looked terrible. I mean, only scoring 22 points and only winning by 15 against a team that was overly matched completely. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the USF game because Charlotte was never truly in this game. The defense completely held them in check. And, there were points where Charlotte would move the ball, but then they would shoot themselves in the foot by penalties. So as much as it seemed like Charlotte was moving, had some stuff working, it was, obviously because they were making those penalties to help them move it along. But for the most part, the defense was tremendous. And, again, grain of salt because it's not the greatest of opponents. But so far, out of 4 games, you can extrapolate from this that there is a trend here that the defense is very good and that the team can rely on this going forward. So if the team can rely on defense going forward, they don't have to be as dominant on offense. Not that they are dominant, but, they don't have to put up, 40, 50 points a game, which they won't. They're not good enough to do that. But I will say Trey Wilson was out. Andy Jean did get some time. He got a big run play and a nice reception. And, Pearsall had a tremendous catch, just a one-hander, and it looked just like the Jordan logo, which everyone was, hyping up. And it was like the top play yesterday. It was sick. It was, and he held on to it because he got smashed by 2 guys and just a hell of a catch. And he had a great game. And, it's just, I really think this team is not great on offense, and it's not even necessarily very good. It's probably about above average, I will say, at this point, which is not where we want to be as fans. I mean, I'm definitely a Florida fan, and I definitely want to see this team win and score a lot of points. But at this point, I think we just need this team to keep winning games, which now they've won 3 games in a row, the first time in a long time. Last year, I don't think they ever did it last year. So, 3 wins in a row is something to celebrate. Moving on to the next game, which they're going to play Kentucky, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, just about how they did against Vandy. But, it's not the end of the world. It's definitely not good. But I don't see this team being as bad as maybe it looked yesterday. It was definitely not the same team as it was against Tennessee, largely because of who was out on the offensive line. And it sucks that the offensive line, the backups are not up to par right now, but it is what it is. The starting offensive line is good enough to win in the SEC, obviously, because they did well enough against Tennessee. So, got to hope that the injuries stay away and that they continue to get the guys healthy and to get the guys back which they will for next week. So moving on, let's talk about the USF Rice game. Just ridiculous, man. The fact that USF had not won an FBS game in God knows how how long. I don't even remember how long. I know they were like 1 in like 37 or some shit like that over Jeff Scott's tenure, and then like the last bit of Charlie Strong, and then going into now starting Alex Golish's tenure. So it was a long 4 or 5 years there where we USF did not get an FBS win. I think the last FBS win was against Temple. So they literally only beat one FBS team in like 5 years. And it was just such a terrible long stretch, and just really needed to get that off of our backs to finally move forward. And yes, I'm wearing my green USF shirt because, you know what, I'm proud today. And I was glad I was wearing it all day because, you know what, they deserve this win. The guys, especially the ones that have been there forever, you know, Atkins, the wide receiver, he's been there a long time. Some of the defensive players have been there a really long time. Even Byron Brown, he's only been there a year and a half. He saw the bad times, so he's well aware of what is going on there. So all these guys deserve it. I mean, Byron Brown just went off, had over 500 yards of offense. Uh, the wide receiver for USF, God, fuck, I don't have his name. Hold on a second. Simmons, yeah, just Simmons, just 272 yards of receiving yards, the most ever by a wide receiver in the state of Florida. That is tremendous. Like, you know, considering the level of receiver that has come through the state of Florida, Michael Irvin, Rydell Anthony, Ike Hilliard, Jacquez Green, Peter Warwick, Percy Harvin, and he did it bigger than all of them. That is just killer, man. Hats off to you, dude. You were just unguardable. Like every time out, I was watching the highlights. He just smoked those DBs every time. He just, man, it was such a great effort. And, you know, they put up 600 yards of offense. And, you know, JT Daniels for Rice put up a big effort, and they definitely stayed in this game for a while until really Daniels got hurt. If he stays in, I don't know what happens. I mean, he probably throws for at least 500 yards because he was going for it. At that point, it didn't even matter because they only ran the ball for a yard, literally 1 yard, minus the sacks and everything or whatever. So that is crazy. 1 rushing yard. I'm happy for them. This is the first big victory in a long time. Hopefully this is just the start. We can see moving forward where this team goes. I think that USF has a great path forward. The conference is not that difficult. There are plenty of winnable games. Temple, Navy is winnable. UConn is a winnable game. Just North Texas, I believe, is a winnable game. There's a ton of games that USF has a shot in going through the rest of the year. You know, they could win 7 games, maybe even 8, which I don't think anybody would have thought coming in. I mean, I think I had them at like 5-7, 6-6, but this is great step forward. I love what Alex Golish is doing. He is not satisfied at all. He wants to put the pedal to the metal, which the offense clearly does and is clearly capable. Byron Brown is a stud. 22 of 29, 2 TDs, and 82 rushing yards on the ground. Still, I believe, leading the nation for quarterbacks rushing. Just a sick game overall. Just, I'm so proud of them. You know, it's a great effort, and it's a huge step in the right direction. So hopefully we can continue this, especially next week. Okay, moving forward, USC, kind of a tricky game out in the desert against Arizona State. You know, they had their hands full because Arizona State was doing every trick play imaginable, fake punts, backwards passes, onside kicks, literally everything. They emptied the bag. They did not wait. They did not hesitate. They called everything. And you know what? USC did their best to withstand it. And Caleb Williams freaking dominated, regardless of the fact that Arizona State pulled out all these stops. You know, Caleb Williams looked great again. He's, now in position to set himself up for another Heisman campaign, which at this point, I don't really see anyone else in front of him at this point, because he was so dominant last year and he's continuing it again. I mean, over 300 yards again, 3 TDs again, just killer instinct this kid has. And he's so hard to bring down. Arizona State struggled all game, and most everyone does. They put up over 500 yards of offense. Lloyd, the running back for USC, I think that's their bellwether now, and they need to just go with him. He had 154 on the ground. Brennan Rice, the receiver, 133 in the air, 2 touchdowns. It could have been a lot worse as far as the score, but Arizona State stayed with them. Scatabo, the running back for them, the kid just kept coming and he never gave up. He was definitely a worthy competitor. He's very short, but really quick. And he also played quarterback in high school. So he has a decent enough arm to be able to do those trick plays that they really took advantage of USC. But just, because Arizona State was 9 of 16 on 3rd and 4th down conversions. That's really fucking good. That kept them in the game, and they were able to do all those trick plays to be able to convert those plays. But again, this is a Pac-12 road game. You honestly just want to survive this game because, you know what? It's not the end of the world. They still won this game. And next week, setting up that big matchup against Colorado, I really think USC should blow the doors off them as well. It's another, offensive team that Colorado is going to struggle with because their defense is not very good. Okay, moving on to the rest of these games. Rutgers, Michigan, I wasn't really impressed. They're kind of whatever. Michigan is just this team that, who cares? Harbaugh was back, but Rutgers is not a very good team. Sorry, Jeff Schmidt, my buddy. They're a below average Big Ten team, and whatever. Okay, I think probably the game of the day. This was just I totally thought that Clemson had this game, this being the Florida State Clemson game. Clemson had control of the game from almost the beginning. FSU clawed back. And then really what was the turning point was Clemson was driving. They just had a big run. Klubnik goes back to pass, and the running back, he looks like the duty or like the responsibilities of picking up that blindside blitz, and he doesn't notice it. So he trails off to the left a little bit. The blindside blitz just comes in and he's just unblocked and just boom, smashes Klubnik. He drops the ball. And this is where I think that Florida State had the luck in their favor all day. There had a bunch of other things go their way, but this was specifically what I noticed when this happened. The ball bounces. It's going right for a big guy, one of Florida State's D linemen, and he goes to pick it up, and it bounces out of his hand. And not only does it bounce out of his hand, but it bounces directly into the DB that was on that blitz that sacked Klubnik and forced the fumble. And it goes right into that guy's hands, and he's just off and running. And it's like, if it goes into the big guy's hands, he picks it up, and he probably doesn't score because he's slow, and someone comes and tackles him. But no, goes right in the DB's hands and boom, they score. And you knew the luck was on Florida State's side because of that, because it was like, oh, wow. Like, that was very fortunate. The rest of the game, Clemson still controlled the game. They get an opportunity to hit a field goal to win. Minute 45 left, set up a 29-yard field goal. I'll have to tell you this just because it was, how superstitious I am. Yes, I'm not a Florida State fan, and I wanted them to lose. So I'm watching the game. My fiance comes back from working out. She comes in, and I'm saying hello to her, and then she comes into the office and sees that it's close, and she goes, I'm going to walk away before you tell me I'm bad luck. And I'm just like, oh my God, don't ever say that. And she just walks off. Literally, they're setting up to kick the field goal, and boom, he misses the field goal. And I'm just like, oh my God. Basically, saying no hitter when a no hitter is happening. And I told even her dad later that night, and I was like talking about don't say no hitter during a no hitter. It's like, yeah, you don't ever say that. And she just like had no idea. She's not really into sports. She's definitely not into football. She only really follows baseball. But I just was like, oh my God, don't ever jinx it. Just if you were gonna just not say anything, just close the door, walk out. That's all you have to do. But regardless, just crazy ending. They go into overtime. Florida State scores really quickly, and then Clemson can't figure out their offense from there, and that was it. And just, I mean, I would have thought Florida State would have lost this game, and they barely survived this game. I'm talking about Clemson dominated this game the entire way, and Florida State really did not deserve to win this game. But I'm looking at the GameCast win probability on ESPN, and Clemson had a large percentage of the game they were likely to win this game. And just if I was Dabo, I would sick to my stomach after this game. I would be, should have beaten this team. But I will say this, Florida State does have a decent offense. Coleman is good. I'm not going to lie. I think he's definitely better than Wilson. And but their offense, besides that, I'm not really that enamored with. Jaheim Bell, okay. Benson, I never really thought too highly of. I thought he just did well in games against bad teams, which, okay, did well against bad teams. But no, their defense is not good. Clemson, put up huge numbers on them. And this game honestly should have been a 2-score game. And Florida State just got extremely lucky to be in this game. They did nothing in the second half. They had a field goal, and every other possession was a punt and a turnover on downs because it was like near the end of the game. So, I don't think they're very good. They still have games against Duke, which Duke has quality players. Their quarterback is really good. Wake Forest has a good quarterback. They lost yesterday against Tech, but I think Tech is better than years past. So, that's understandable that Wake might lose a game or two, maybe even more. But Wake is a solid team, and it's in God, I can't even remember where Wake's the hometown is. It's at Wake Forest at least. And then they have a game against Miami, and they have a game against Florida on the road. And then if they get to the ACC championship game, they have a game against either UNC, most likely, or again against Clemson. So I saw one of my friends saying that, Florida State's going to go undefeated until the playoff. Highly doubt it. They're going to lose at least one game out of that mix. They should at least lose one game, probably two. And I would have thought they would have lost these two games against LSU and Clemson, but they survived them. So, LSU shot themselves in the foot, and Clemson, clearly the better team. Just Florida State's luck was in Florida State's favor that day. Okay, moving on. Oklahoma, Cincinnati. I feel bad for Gus Johnson because Gus Johnson had probably one of the worst games all day, and there was a slew of amazing games. And for whatever reason, they decided to put him on the Oklahoma Cincinnati game. And, Oklahoma is a good team. I'm definitely seeing them perform a lot better than last year. But Cincinnati's not very good. I'm not really the biggest fan of Emory Jones. I know it's probably well documented, especially with some of my articles I've done over the years, being critical of his play. But Cincinnati, put up a decent fight, but, they never were going to really compete with Oklahoma. One of the Emory Jones passes in the end zone, it was into double coverage, and it was just like, man, where are you throwing this to? But so Cincinnati loses this one. It was a close one, but Oklahoma wins 20-6. Okay. Next one, Auburn, Texas A&M. I would have thought more of Auburn in this game, but Auburn looked putrid. I think they had, 200 total yards of offense. I mean, both teams are not very good, and I'm not really sold on A&M until they beat an Ole Miss, or they beat Alabama, or they beat LSU, which they have to play all three. So I don't really think highly of them. They still could win 8 games, but they may even struggle against Arkansas, which I know is coming up soon. But A&M wins this one 27-10. There was even a touchdown on a defensive return by Auburn where Jimbo was out in the middle of the field. And I'm just like, oh my God, Jimbo, you look like Mitch McConnell out there struggling to get out of the way. But no, it was just kind of a boring game. Not really anything to take home from, but God, it feels like Ainias Smith has been there forever for A&M, and he's still there. Yeah, not much here from these games, or from this game. The next game I have is Kentucky Vanderbilt. Kentucky gets 2 pick sixes in this game, and without that, this game would have been a lot closer, because Devin Leary did not look great in this game. He still had over 200 yards, but he had 2 interceptions himself. And the run game was okay for Kentucky, about 160 yards. But Vanderbilt, was kind of messing around there for a little bit. And it just was really those turnovers were key, because both of them led to points. So obviously a 14-point swing there. I think definitely Vanderbilt is beatable for Florida. And now setting up this game with Kentucky in next week in Lexington. I don't know. I mean, Devin Leary is a good quarterback. I don't know how good this Kentucky team doesn't seem that great. I mean, just from watching this set of highlights of the whole game, it just doesn't seem like Kentucky is that strong. But then again, Florida didn't look that great this last week against Charlotte. But Florida also beat Tennessee pretty handedly. So at this point, I'm going to say that Florida probably should be the better team in this game. But as of right now, Vegas is favoring this game. So we'll talk about that more on Wednesday. But I still think Florida is the better team, and they should win the game. But, the last couple of years have been quite wild up in Lexington. It's a noon game, so we'll see. Okay, SMU, TCU. TCU looking a lot better the last couple of weeks. They were in control of this game pretty thoroughly. Morris, the quarterback for TCU, put up 261 for 3 TDs. Just solid performance. They never really were in doubt. They win this one 34-17. TCU is definitely in the mix for a Big 12 possibility, championship game possibility, because their only loss was against Colorado, who is, as of right now, in the Pac-12. So everything's still to play for TCU. So we'll see for them. Okay, next game, Ole Miss, Alabama. Jalen Milroe had an efficient game. He had an interception, but he had an efficient game. Only 4 incompletions, 17 of 21 for 225 and a TD. I don't know, man. They beat Ole Miss. I'm not the biggest fan of Ole Miss's defense. Never really have been the last couple of years. They've been really soft. Lane Kiffin is not the best of defensive teams. He puts up good offenses, but even this offense kind of struggled. But Bama's defense is still really good. They held USF to only 3 points last week, which USF obviously put up a ton of yards and a ton of points. So going forward, this Bama team is not out of anything. This is their first SEC win. Their loss that they had this year was against Texas. So maybe their demise is too soon, and maybe they still have a chance to really contend here, which I think they do. I think LSU Bama game is probably going to be the decider here this year of who goes to the SEC championship game from the West, the last of the West East matchups. So a lot to play for Alabama. They win 24-10, just, moving forward. And they have a lot of tough games going forward, but this is a big one to get out of the way, especially because now, just getting Lane Kiffin off their back, because it's always such a circus when this game comes up. Okay. The hullabaloo again behind Colorado. I knew this was going to happen. I called it before the game, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I'm just being that this is what the reality was. Oregon was a really big step up in competition for Colorado. So Colorado came into this game 3-0. They thought so highly of themselves. They were looking at their own press clippings. And, Dan Lanning said it before the game in his pregame speech, they're playing for clicks. We're playing for wins. And it looked like that out there because they stomped them, and it could have been way worse. I'm looking at the win probability here. They had a win probability of 93% to start the game, and it only grew to 100% by halftime. So literally never in doubt the entire game. So, Dan Lanning had this team prepared. It is a very good team. Bo Nix, got to put him on the Heisman list. You have to. Has to be minimum top 4. I mean, he's up there with Caleb and Michael Penix Jr., which we'll talk about later, and Drake May and Quinn Ewers now too. So you have all 4 or 5 of those guys just studs. I mean, Sam Hartman kind of fell off a little bit this last game, but maybe we'll talk about that game and we'll understand why. But Bo Nix, solid game, 276 in the air, 3 TDs. And then he also had another touchdown on the ground. So 4 total TDs. Just a tremendous game from him. Just now, Oregon, big step for them, beating this Pac-12 foe. The first conference game, they now have a chance to really outpace everyone else. And I think they can. I think with Oregon and USC, I think those two right now, Utah definitely, but they got to get Cam Rising back. And Washington. I mean, it's honestly, this year would be the perfect year for a 12-team playoff because Oregon would get in, Utah would get in, USC would get in, Washington would get in. Those 4 definitely would get in. Without a doubt, those 4 teams deserve to get in. And UCLA may even sneak in as well. And in Oregon State and Washington State, it's crazy how good this conference is this year. It is remarkable. I love it. I've been watching Pac-12 football the last 6 years since I've moved out here and gotten more and more involved with watching it. And I know people like to talk shit about it because they're on the West Coast and a lot of their games are late. But man, there's a lot of talent here. These teams are really good. And I don't think you can deny that this year Pac-12 is the best conference in the entire country. Okay. But Colorado gets smacked 42-6. Whatever. Is what it is. They got USC next week, and I think they're going to get smacked again. So we'll see. Okay. Interesting game. BYU, Kansas. First Big 12 game for BYU. welcome to the Big 12 because they got smacked as well, 38-27. It was a close game. Jalen Daniels for Kansas is the kid. He's a stud, man. He can move the ball for them. He puts up a lot of big plays. Early in the game, there was a massive hit, fumble, and return for touchdown for KU. And then they got a pick six as well. If Daniels is healthy, they're a really good team, this Kansas team. But Slovis didn't look too bad either for BYU, which I've said all year. I like Slovis and I like BYU. This was a good game. BYU has a lot to play for. This is not the end of their year. But Kansas can really run the ball. Okay. So Kansas wins 38-27. UTSA, Tennessee. So Tennessee back in their winning ways, really demolished UTSA 45-14. This game was never close. They really put it away in the first half and just kind of, slept walk through the rest of the game. But Joe Milton had 209 through the air. He had a really long run at one point. Samson Smarty Pants. He had 139 yards and 2 TDs on the ground. Good performance by them. They get off the schneid, but it's kind of tough in the SEC East because that one loss really kind of hampers them a lot because now they're technically 2 games behind Florida because Florida would have to lose 2 games for Tennessee to overcome them because they lost head-to-head to them. So a lot to play for. They could still end up beating Georgia. They could still get in the playoff more than they could get into the SEC championship game. Like as of right now, because they only have 1 loss, if they win out, they would have a really good shot at getting into the playoff. But it's going to be a little bit harder to get to the SEC championship game, which is weird how that works, but that's how it is. Texas Baylor, sorry. Texas was in control of this game throughout. Quinn Ewers looks really good. 293 yards through the air, 1 TD passing, and he had what is it? I think he had another touchdown running. Yeah, he had a touchdown on the ground as well. Jonathan Brooks, running back for Texas, looked pretty good. Just Baylor's not really good, but they also have played 2 top 12 teams in Utah and Texas now. This is setting up really nicely, though, for a really big OU Texas game. And considering it's the crescendo of their time in the Big 12, will be really nice to see this game come to, complete here, and that'd be the end of their run there in the Big 12. Okay, last thing I wanted to say was there was an interception in the end zone, and it really ended any chance of Baylor getting back in the game. That was it. But Ohio State, Notre Dame, the other big game of the day. Just these are one of those games where you're like, man, even though it's low scoring, it's still a really good game. Sam Hartman did not look great. He only put up 175 yards through the air. He had a TD. They came back in this one. They were down, I believe, 10-0. And then they came back, went up 14-10 into the fourth quarter, had the ball with a chance to run the clock out, and they couldn't do it. Just heartbreaking. Ohio State gets the ball back. McCord takes him down the field. 1 play left with 3 seconds left. Hands off, running back dives in, gets a touchdown. They get the extra point. They kick the ball out of bounds on the kickoff. And then Notre Dame had 1 more play. They did like the lateral shit, and it didn't really work out. But just a great game. Ryan Day was really pissed after the game, talking about Lou Holtz and just talking so much shit. So, good for Ohio State. This is a huge win. If they'd have lost there, they would have had, slim hopes of getting into the playoff. Now they have everything to play for. But I think Notre Dame really has a lot to play for because they still play Clemson. They still play Duke next week. And they still play I believe even North Carolina. I think there's like one other tough game, but still, USC as well. So they have a lot of tough games and a lot to play for Notre Dame. If they're going to be a playoff team, they have an opportunity to contend. I still believe in them. And I still think Sam Hartman's a really good quarterback. And I think this is their best chance out of any year. But it's tough. They have a tough road. Their schedule was probably tougher than anyone else's this year. Okay, moving on. Really boring game. Penn State smokes Iowa. Iowa only has 76 total yards. 76. That is fucking nothing. Oh my God. How do you watch these games, you Big Ten fans? I couldn't watch it. I really could not. If I was an Iowa fan, I would stop being an Iowa fan. This is atrocious. Penn State smokes them. Alar really didn't even look that great. He had 4 TDs though, but only 166 total yards. They have 397 total, which is amazing considering that their best yardage-wise running back had 72 yards on 21 carries. That's a tough yard per carry. That is probably, what is it? 3.4. Whew. 3.4 yards per carry. That's ugly. And Singleton had 2.9. Yikes. That is just, ugh. I don't know how you people watch this stuff. But very boring game. Ugh. UCF, Kansas State. Interesting game. Kansas State gets the win. It was back and forth there for most of it. But Kansas State kind of pulls away at the end and gets the win, 44-31. UCF got that late touchdown. UCF, their defense is just not very good. And they gave up 536 yards and they had 10 penalties. They're just not a good team. Timmy McClain, he's not very good either. He used to be at USF and he's now at UCF. And I don't really think that much of John Rice Plumlee either. Plumlee wasn't in the game because he was hurt, but I don't think much of Gus Malzahn as a play caller. And I'm actually glad that UCF has him as a coach because, now that they're in the Big 12, their ceiling is 6-7 wins. So, hey, he won't last long and they'll have to figure something out, but looks like USF finds their coach and UCF is going to be stuck with what they have for the foreseeable future. Okay, moving on. This was definitely one of the games of the day. Oregon State, Washington State, back and forth the entire time. Oregon State scores a late touchdown to make it 35-38, and they had an onside kick to see if they could get the ball and tie it up, but just didn't. Cam Ward for Washington State had a remarkable game, just put up huge numbers, 404 through the air, 4 TDs. At one point, he was 15 of 16 for 256 yards. He was just on fire. They just kept coming back to Oregon State. They had 2 fumbles that Washington State had 2 fumbles that put Oregon State in the game. They had a fake punt, Washington State at one point, and then they were up 35-14. And then they kicked this lucky field goal that bounces off the left upright and then somehow goes in. And that really was the difference in the game, because if they don't make that field goal, Oregon State could have tied it there at the end. So Washington State survives. Oregon State is a really good team. So this is not the end of them either. They have plenty to play for. They have plenty of tough games. So we will see them week in and week out, because this is just the start of all this Pac-12 craziness, because all these teams are starting to play each other, and there's going to be some really high scoring, really tremendous games. So this is one of the first of, not only was the Utah UCLA game really good, but this was one of them as well. Okay. Arkansas LSU, another really great game. This was such a great day. You just have to really savor this, because I don't think we get many of these where it's just a lot of them living up to the hype, living up to the last second. Literally LSU scores a field goal at the end with 3 seconds left to win the game. They win 34-31. Jaden Daniels, a really great game, 320 yards through the air, 4 TDs, had a pick. Just killer game from him. KJ Jefferson looked really good as well. He had 2 picks, though, which really hurt him, but he had 289 and 3 TDs in the air. And just very close for Arkansas. I thought they were going to pull it off, but they didn't. And LSU now 2-0 in conference play. And, like I said, that LSU-Alabama game always looms, and it's going to be, right there in the middle of November, presenting itself for LSU or either Alabama to take the West. So, as much as we always like to say there's other teams in the West, it really always comes down to LSU and Alabama. It really does the last 20 years or so. Okay. Last 2, North Carolina, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was up to the task for a little while, and then North Carolina just took over. The defense for North Carolina, I'm not really sold on because Pitt is not a very good team. Pitt's quarterback Jurovich, where's his name? Jurkovich. He went out though, so it really dampened Pittsburgh's chance to really try to come back in this game. But Drake May had a really great game. He had a TD pass and 2 rushing touchdowns. And Carolina also had a punt return for a touchdown. And Pittsburgh had a kickoff return for a touchdown. So good special teams game to see 2 returns. You don't see that very often. But Carolina wins this one. Keep winning, 4-0, and first conference win. So it sets them up moving forward. Last game of the day that I have was Cal Washington. Michael Penix Jr. If you don't know the name, I know you're starting to hear it. So this guy is someone to look out for. I know his games are late. Had 304 yards in the air, 4 TDs, did have a pick, but Washington just dominated this game. They were up at one point 45-12 or 52-12. And, Cal kind of just messed around and got a couple of late touchdowns, but this was never close. Had a lot of big plays for Washington. They had a pick 6 to start the game, a punt return for a touchdown, 3 total picks by their defense for their wide receivers, Polk and Odunze, that went over 125 yards each and 2 TDs. Just Odunze, I think that's how you say his name. I mean, this is a good team, and you will see them going forward when they play USC, when they play Utah, when they play UCLA. This is a team that deserves to be talked about, and not only just in the Pac-12 contenders, but a CFP contender, because they definitely have the team to be able to withstand it. So that's it. I know there was a ton. There's a ton of games going on. There's a ton more next week. We are in the thick of things. Conference play has officially started. We're now seeing a lot of, of those tomato can games. They're starting to go away. And we're starting to see now, next week with Florida playing Kentucky and, USC playing Colorado, we're going to see a lot of these bigger games. It's exciting to see these teams play conference play because now we're getting actual results instead of just beating a team up by 50 points. And it's like, oh, what good does this do? It doesn't really show us how good these teams are. Now we're getting actual proof. So with that being said, that is the show. My name is Chris McLean. I am the host of Hater Radio. Ian Gibson will be back hopefully Wednesday. You can reach us at haterradio.com for all of our articles that we do. We cover UCLA, USC, Florida, and USF. Those are the 4 main teams that we cover. But we also technically really cover all of the teams, all of the major games, all the ones that we feel that are important for you to know. We will cover them. And we do a recap show on Sundays, and then we do a preview show on Wednesdays. 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. You can catch us live on all the formats: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or not Instagram, YouTube. and then it'll be re-aired. It's on hosted on YouTube as well, so you can catch them there. For Twitter, it is hater_radio for both TikTok as well and Instagram and Threads. For Facebook, it is Hater Radio CFB. And for YouTube, it is at Hater Radio. So that's where you can find us. We talk all about college football. We'll see you on Wednesday. Looking forward to this next week because it's going to be just as good as this last week. All right, take care.